Welcome to Kankakee Podcast, where we talk about the people and places of Kankakee County. I'm Jake Lamore, and I could be wrong on this. I think in sometime in 2020 or maybe 2021, you started to see some yard signs pop up around the Kankakee area, even into parts of Bourbonnais and Bradley that said Kankakee Forgives on it. And I know the first time I saw one of those yard signs, I thought, what in the heck is that? What does it mean? And I also thought, okay, I like that, but what is it? And that's what we're going to find out today. I'm sitting with Aaron Clark, who is your title is executive director, I would say, right, of Kankakee Forgives?
Yeah, founder and executive director, yeah.
Yeah, so Kankakee Forgives is a nonprofit organization, still fairly new to the area, that's all about helping prevent not only gun violence, but just violence in general, helping prevent violence in the city of, it's just the city, right? Or do you guys go outside the city?
We don't, our focus is Kankakee, city of, but we've had clients and people we've served outside of Kankakee, so the greater area, Kankakee County, but primarily Kankakee.
Okay, that's what I thought. We're going to dive deep into Kankakee Forgives, but before we do that, your name has been associated with so many different things over the years. I feel like everyone knows you for different things. There's things I don't even know you from. Like I know you for Kankakee Forgives, but I know there's a bunch of things that came before that. So just a little bit about you and how you wound up in Kankakee.
Yeah. So born and raised in Kankakee, left right after I got out of high school, went to Atlanta and got married, had children, and moved back in 2005. So, yeah, that's the short of it. Right. I don't know how much you want to know.
Well, for you, I mean, what was it like for you growing up in Kankakee? What was Kankakee like then from your perspective, And I'm not trying to say, hey, give me your exact age number, but from that time period that you were growing up, when was that?
Yeah, so 70s, 80s. Okay. So, so I went to, elementary. So I went to elementary in Kankakee, went to Taft. I love to tell kids I went to this school. But went to school. It was great. Education was great. Loved my teachers, loved my community. Grew up in a single parent home with my mother. When I was young, just very active in sports. Football was my sport. As I got older, I got into basketball. Yeah, so our neighborhood was Kankakee was cool. Still is.
Oh, yeah, obviously.
Yeah. So, just great. Just walking down the street and knowing your neighbors and people feeling really comfortable with, I know your mom. And there was a certain sense of safety that came just from us being a really close-knit community and the meeting place being at church on Sundays. So I'm going to tell your mom when I see her, those kind of things, so.
Yeah, because I'm going to see her in church on Sunday.
Right.
I'm going to tell her what you did on Thursday.
Yeah.
In front of my house.
Yep. So walked every square inch of the city. So we were out and about, so I grew up in the era where there were no cell phones, no video games, no VCRs, no CD players, none of that. You went outside and played. So most of my lifelong friends just come from that era. Just spent a lot of time together in the city. So a lot of fun.
So you come back in 2005 from Atlanta? So you were down there that whole time.
Yeah, about 16 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you come back. What was Kankakee like when you came back? And what did you come back to do in 2005?
Yeah, so Kankakee had changed a lot. There was still the down home feel. I still love the draping maple trees on, and the parks and all of that. But there had been a loss of hope. And that was probably the first thing that I immediately noticed. And not just the loss of hope, but it was being expressed verbally so consistently. When we first got back, I was like, we're getting ready to start a campaign, shut your mouth talking about Kankakee campaign. So it was like I hadn't heard it or felt it like that before I left. So when I came back, that was kind of shocking. Like, what is going on? So
is that what brought you back? You saw or heard this going on, or what was the reasoning for coming back?
No, so the reason for coming back was calling. You know, I had got to a point in my marriage with my family that I just felt that pressure that something was next, and it's not here. Now, the short of the story is, I thought it meant not in the house we were living in, but it ended up being not in the city. So Kankakee ended up being the place that I was called back to. So came back willingly with a little arm twisting at first. So I said, I don't want to suffer.
Yeah.
So let me just do what I need to do. And so I came back.
And then what did you do when you came back?
So my journey started, so I got a big 20-foot Penske truck with a trailer on the back with a van. Didn't even need straps. It was packed so tight. And we get off the expressway. And as soon as I get off the expressway, I look to my left, and this is at exit 312, so on the east side of town. And I see a building that says Youth for Christ. And so I'm like telling my wife, I'm going to stop in here for a second. And so she's like, no, I said, I promise you.
Like, we just had this really long,
right,
ride from Atlanta, and you want
to stop. And I like to talk. So I go in, and then when I walk in, the building is full of children. And I was like, what is this? And the first thing I noticed was that there were no adults. I mean, not like no adults, but it's like there should be a lot of people in this building right now.
Right, because there's a lot of kids.
Yeah,
so there should be a lot of adults.
Yeah. And so and more particularly, I didn't see representation from the neighborhood that they were in. So I said, I'm coming back. And they said, okay. And I came back. And so that was my first, because I was doing a program called Just Using My Power Jump.
Okay.
Down in Atlanta before I came back. So that was, a lot of my passion is around youth and young adults and empowering families, that kind of thing. So when I saw that, I came back and I jumped in and I married it. So that was where I began.
So you started working for Youth for Christ when you came back?
No, not
okay.
right away.
No, okay.
Yep. So,
but you started at least being a part of the organization.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I started off as a volunteer. I probably volunteered about 2 years because I was still driving trucks at the time. I drove trucks for about 20 years. So
okay, talking semi trucks, right?
Tractor trailers. Yep.
So you're working full time as a truck driver. You're volunteering at Youth for Christ, and then when did you start? Did you start working there full time after that couple of years, or?
No, actually, I continued driving trucks. And so the difficulty in making this kind of life change, career change, was it's a nonprofit organization. They don't have money. I'm in a field where I'm not making a whole lot of money, but I'm not crying every week.
Yeah.
So I did get a company to agree to give me 1 day off a week, which was weird. The other truckers had a problem with that.
Oh, I'm sure they did.
Yeah. So to give me 1 day off a week to volunteer. So that turned into, okay, well, we see that you're really serious about this. We're going to give you a little bit of money. So fast forward a little bit. I'm involved with Olivet and Marriage Inc. and all of these other things. And it just occurs to me, I'm at this banquet. So Dr. Olney and his wife were like, make sure you coming to the banquet, right? I'm like, yeah, I'll be there. And so I get a text. You coming to the banquet? I'm like, why are y'all bugging me about this banquet? So get to the banquet. And we're sitting there and they're getting ready to start handing out, acknowledgments. And they start talking about this guy that and all of the things that he's involved in. And I'm sitting in my chair like, I bet his life is a wreck. That sounds like too much. I'm just being real with you, right? I'm like, I bet this guy is a total. And then they said, and his lovely wife, and said my wife, and I'm like, if you could see if you could see the picture that was taken that night, because it was like, the man is you.
Gosh, that's great. You're just sitting there, man, this guy, his life must be horrible because he's involved in all these.
You're doing too much.
Is that when it occurred to you, like, oh, I need to dial it back a little bit or reconfigure some things?
I kid you not.
Yeah.
The next day, I quit driving trucks. I said, that's it. I see it. I'm done. So I call a friend of mine. I'm telling him what's going on. And he says, Aaron, I'll let you can drive for my company. So he just made a way for me to be able to be flexible. So that happened. And slowly but surely, Youth for Christ said, you know what? We can give you a little bit. So it was a slow transition, but eventually it was like you work full time with Youth for Christ. So did that for a long time.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what were some of the things that you did at Youth for Christ with the kids that you really feel was impactful?
Well, I would say some of the most memorable times that were impactful is like just on the spot surveys. So like one survey, this was junior high club, and I asked the question, I said, by show of hands, how many of you live at home with your biological father and mother that you were conceived after their marriage? Not one hand went up. I said, okay, how many of you live at home with your biological father and mother that you were conceived after they were married? Not one hand went up. How many of you live at home with your biological father and mother? It's about 3 or 4 hands went up. And so that was something that was like a corporate revelation of like, this is serious. And so that started me down a road of really building on the principles of family and marriage and building strong relationships. So we did big. We would stretch out like 8 tables through the whole building and have dinners once a month. And we started teaching, like, because I would ask, how many of y'all have dinner, at least 3 times a week with your whole family at the table? And they're like, nobody does that.
Yeah, what are you talking about?
Yeah. And so that was just so foreign. So, but job building skills, taking them on experiences they've never been on. But I would say the most impactful is really drilling down on family values, the value and principles that come out of my faith, which is in Jesus Christ. And just teaching them those things.
Yeah, because you're a pastor
as well. Yes, a pastor as well.
Yeah.
A pastor as well.
A man, like I said, a man of many talents.
Yeah, we have church every week about 4 days a week.
Okay.
So people say, how do you do that?
Yeah,
I'm like, go to the school.
Goodness.
Go to the basketball games. There are a million opportunities to share the love and gospel of Jesus Christ.
That's true. Yeah. That's true. That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
So when did you start working for the Kankakee School District then?
Yep. So I was director. So eventually from volunteer, I moved up to a director of a program to director of the center. I did that for about 10 years. And then it just got to a point where I kind of felt like the road was turning and I didn't know where it was going. And I just called Dr. Walters, who was the superintendent of schools at that time. And I said, I have some room in my life if you have any kind of need for me. And she said, give me 2 weeks. And 2 weeks later, she said, I need you to come and it was an interview. And it was like, so I started there. I had done a lot of work in the school district. So
I would imagine
you wouldn't know the difference because I was there all the time.
Yeah, because, Youth for Christ, I would imagine tries to work a lot with the school district and being like, hey, you could do this after school or, what have you. Yeah. Or on the weekend.
Yeah. And I think that the first test of that being an employee was one summer, which is another impactful thing I did, was built a studio. and brought it to the school for a summer school program. And it was that next fall that I said, you know what, I think I could work in this system. And I appreciate her leadership and a lot of the staff, we could work together.
So were you basically doing the same, when you started working for the school district, was it basically the same kind of work? Or what was your official...
Violence prevention coordinator.
Okay.
So really a big part of my job was to identify things inside the school district from grades 6 through 12 that could eventually lead to violence, and then create programs to circumvent that. A small part of my job, which is much bigger than small, but it was, you go by percentage.
Yes,
it was supposed to be 25%. But a small part of my job was an adult mental health training program. So through that program, we became the most trained community in the world for TheraPlay, which is an international organization that trains on trauma and that kind of thing. We are the first community to train teenagers in TheraPlay, trained just so many people in youth mental health first aid, and just really pushing the envelope on it's time to sit down and talk to somebody and learn some coping skills and learn how to deal with the psyche of the things that we face as a community. So.
Yes. And especially as a young kid, so that kid doesn't, when they get older, mimic the things that they've been around, right? The negative behavior that they grew up around, or were exposed to.
Yeah.
How does one, prevent these violent situations in school? How did you just form relationships with the kids, or I'm sure it was a lot of different things, but were you going to the classrooms each day, just checking in? How does a person do that?
Yeah.
And it's tricky because a lot of times kids don't want to talk to an adult about whatever's going on. Right, anything, right? Especially when they start getting to that preteen age,
Yeah.
So
that's a good question, because really you basically gave the recipe.
Okay.
It is. So to simplify that, though, is be present and be consistent. So that was really the upper hand that I had. So first of all, I already got this relationship through Youth for Christ. So a lot of people see you. I don't know you. I see you all the time. But, when it's awkward and kids don't know you, it's just like, I'm here. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm not trying to take anything from you. I'm here. And as you do that, you have these events and opportunities for them to, hey, what are you doing after school? And a lot of times the best thing to do was to take it to the classroom or to the school. So I set the music studio up in the school. This is you're coming here anyway, so why not go where they are?
Yeah.
So eventually what happened is when you start talking about how do you reduce violence, this is the birthplace of Kankakee Forgives.
Okay.
That's where it started.
So, you're doing this work, and then you're thinking, well, we can make this bigger than just the school district, right? Is that what, as you're doing this work for District 111, you're like, we need to take this outside of the district?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the way Kankakee Forgives began was, if you know anything about youth ministry, you're always trying to find something that relates. And
you're trying to connect, always. And that's a constant thing, because each generation of kids is different from the other, and not even just a generation. It could just be a year between the different kids you see. Yeah. You got to keep up on the trends.
Man. And TikTok has them going at lightning speed.
Yes.
What was hot last week is gone.
It's gone, man. You don't even talk about it anymore. Yeah. It's done.
So I stopped trying, because they're like, Mrs. Clark, that's old. I'm like, it just happened.
I know. I was thinking about when I was a kid, I was attached to Scooby-Doo for so long. And now my son is attached to a new, something, whether it's a cartoon or a YouTube series or whatever, it's like, it's maybe a week long and then it's on to the next one, then, or maybe it lasts a little longer than a week, but it goes much faster where it was like Scooby-Doo for me was like a years on end. But for him, it's just a constant rollover. So, the birth of Kankakee Forgives it happened, during your work at District 111.
Yeah. And I was still with Youth for Christ.
And you were still with,
so it was kind of,
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Man. So, how did, walk us through the birth then of Kankakee Forgives?
Yeah. So we had started a new series for Youth Night. This was with high school students. And the second week, and it, just for those who don't know, youth ministry is like really fast paced. You're trying to get the night is 90 minutes and about 12 of that is substantive content, right? And so this particular night, we were going to talk about forgiveness. And I mentioned forgiveness. And when I said, tonight we're going to talk about forgiveness, one of the students cursed out loud. And this is actually now a whole thing, a better F word, because I said my response was, I'm gonna give you a better F word than that.
Let me replace that F word for you with a different one.
So we started, and when we started, it was like we're at the kind of like wrap it up, but it was so intense that it was like, okay, this is resonating to talk about these things. They had a lot to say. We met after that, and the staff said, we can't just move on to the next thing. That was in October, Jake. In May, we were still talking about it.
And that was October of 2020 or 2021?
2018.
Oh, it's 2018.
Yeah.
It goes back that far.
It goes back that far. So, so we're talking about this, and we cut things out of the program. So it was like, we don't need all of the free time. Just, we don't need the videos. We need to talk about forgiveness. And there were so many, it was so powerful. It was so powerful. So that summer, some of the guys that had been a part of that and just like transformed life, they were like, is it over? And we were like, wow, we just didn't know what to do. So we just continued with a small group of guys. And I'm just talking to people and like sharing like, this is changing lives. Like we never would have thought it would do this. And so one of the people I'm sharing with is Dr. Deb Barron. And she's sitting there like, Aaron, we got to take this to the whole city. And I'm like, okay.
That sounds just like Deb.
So Deb Barron was the one that organized the first community meeting. Police chief, mayor, superintendent. She got everybody in the room. And so I just put a little structure to it, gave it a vision at that time. And it was like, let's go. But the response was overwhelming. And that's when we realized it's like, we want to do this well. So we need to back up and think about how do we actually effectively launch this. So I needed to get some more people in the room. And then at that time, 2018, this goes forward, and then look up and COVID hits.
Yes.
And so we took advantage of that time and the loss of contact with so many people and said, let's drill down on what this is going to look like. So we came back out and launched 2 years ago. Officially, we announced that we were going to launch, and that's how it started.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow. It's like you finally had that epiphany, and it took all those years.
Yeah.
Working with kids.
Yeah.
Practically almost your whole life, because as you mentioned, you were working with youth back in Atlanta.
Yeah.
So it just it's amazing how sometimes it takes all that time to really finally strike that nerve, and you're like, this is it. This is the way to figure it out.
That is so true.
So I feel like so many different people have their own definition of forgiveness, right? So when you say, the premise of Kankakee Forgives, what does that mean?
Yeah.
What is to forgive inside of Kankakee Forgives.
Mhm.
What does forgiveness look like?
Yep. Yep. So the very term Kankakee Forgives, first and foremost, is a declaration over our city. Because through that year of talking to all of those students, we realized how many people are so angry. And so we really wanted it to be a very positive declaration of our city, right? And so what does that mean, Kankakee Forgives? It means that I am willing to relinquish my right to vengeance. And that's why we talked so long, like, oh no. Like, it doesn't mean you have to be friends with that person again. Doesn't mean you have to have warm fuzzies every time you see them. It doesn't mean you need to allow them back into your safe space. It doesn't mean that what they did is okay. So we did a lot of explaining as to this is what it means to forgive. You're simply saying, I'm going to leave you to a power of a system that I don't control. I want to take control of the system that controls me. And that is my financial life, my education, my relationships. And we showed them scientifically, whether it was from the Mayo Clinic or Johns Hopkins. Here's the data on if you decide to hold on to this anger. And I would do things like with the young ones. So I eventually took this down to fourth grade, and the way they understand it, I would play a game. Everybody stand up. All right. Everybody take a deep breath and hold it. And when you have to let your breath out, sit down. And so it's kind of like a last man standing kind of thing, but they would do it, and it's like, oh, and then I would explain to them, this is what it's like to hold on to bitterness. What will eventually happen if you don't let it out? And in fourth grade, it's like, we'll die. I'm like, right.
Yeah, exactly.
It is going to hurt you.
Man,
so
that's a good,
yeah.
That's
so
a good analogy.
It's been so fun to come up with just all kinds of ways that from young to old, they understand that I have to, and we have that on our wall in our office. Do it for you. Let this go for your own sake, because it's going to hurt you first. It might not hurt you tomorrow, but somebody's living in your head right now, and you need to put them out. And so we talk about firing people and rehiring and all of that kind of stuff. So that's what it means, is to let go, let it go, let it go. What good is it doing you to hold on to what somebody's done to you? Actually, it's doing you more harm than good. What good is it going to do you to, and that's what my presentation is about as it relates to gun violence. Like, it's a bullet coming out, but that's also a lot of rage coming out of the end of that gun.
Right. That's where what's pulling the trigger. Otherwise, if that person had practiced forgiveness, they wouldn't be pulling that.
Yeah.
They would be doing other things.
Yeah. I just last week, Jake, this is just last week, I got a group of junior high students in response to a forgiveness presentation that we did at the junior high. We walk in, the counselors had pulled together this group and said, we want you to talk to these kids particularly. One of the kids comes in, he says, man, this saved my life. Because he was like one of the day ones that we were doing it in the classroom. And he said, I learned how to not walk around so angry all the time. And so, that was kind of I needed that a little encouragement that day too.
Sure.
But just to hear somebody in the 7th grade say, as a 5th grader, I can see now where my life would have ended up if I hadn't learned how to just let stuff go. So.
And that's really the age you want to catch them at, right? It's not high school. Yeah. It's junior high or a little bit before that, right?
Yeah.
That you try to get in there and really see how they're feeling. Mm-hmm. So I feel like Kankakee Forgives can be used on so many different levels. I'm sure you run across situations, kind of like what we just mentioned, where someone who is behind the gun, they haven't forgiven someone. So they're pulling the trigger because they're just full of this rage and this vengeance. It goes to that all the way to someone who just forgives Kankakee for all the, it could be in general, just forgetting the bad things that have happened in Kankakee and just moving on.
Yes.
and just making it better, focusing on making it better and not thinking about all the whatever it is, the factories that closed down, or like I said, the gun violence that's happened. Just focus on finding a way to make it better for yourself, your family, whoever it is.
And the city.
The entire city.
You into our long-term goals. So like this is literally in writing. So where we are right now is not where we plan to stay. And you're speaking to something that's very dear to our movement, which is, yes, our citizens need to forgive our city government. Our city government needs to forgive our citizens. And it may not be this present government that needs to be forgiven, or it may not be this present set of citizens, but there's a tension between government and the citizens. There's a tension between law enforcement and the citizens. There's a tension between the school district and the citizens. So all of these things need to be reconciled for us to heal and become whole as a city. And so we can thrive. And that is very true.
Yeah.
That is very true.
I think about that all the time. I'll have conversations with people and they'll bring up things that happened in Kankakee 30 or 40 years ago, and they're still holding on to it. Yeah. And they make the current administration or whatever responsible for it, even though they weren't even there in office in any position when that said thing was going on. So it's just like, no, the city's terrible now. And, so. And
so what all is being missed out on as a result of just that kind of thinking?
I mean,
you know what I mean?
So many things, we could be focusing our energy just on making things better instead of holding on to what's happened in the past.
Yeah.
And as I always say, it's not that we don't talk about the past or we completely forget about it. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you want to talk about it, but within the right context, within the context of, okay, how can we make this better? How can we forgive this or reconcile this and then move on? What's the solution?
Yes.
To this issue.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
because the trend has been, and I attribute most of that to bitterness and unforgiveness, is to let the negative history control the narrative of our present and our future. Because whatever you're letting dictate the narrative of the present, it is going to do the same thing in the future. So until we reconcile those things in the past, and forgiveness is always in the past, even if it was a second ago, right?
That's true. You got a good point there.
It's always in relation to the past. So you got to find a way to deal with that and say, you know what, look, our current mayor doesn't have anything to do with 40 years ago. Our superintendent doesn't have anything to do with 17 years ago. Let's let that go and see, because you might be missing out on a relationship with someone you really need to be in a relationship with. That's why we talk about relationships. That's one of our 5 pillars, is let's look at how this could affect relationships that you might end up in because you're so bitter, or relationships that you could be in because you've forgiven and moved on, and how that'll affect your overall well-being. Mm-hmm. And how would that affect the overall well-being of the city?
Yeah, it trickles down. It really does.
Yeah.
So now I want to get out there too. There's so many parts to Kankakee Forgives. We're obviously just touching on just, one of the main cores right now. But, besides going to the different schools and, doing these seminars on forgiveness and things like that, you are also part of, you could almost say, like a first response team. Like, you are called out if there's a shooting that happens. Hopefully, God forbid, one happens right now. But let's say there is one right now. There's a good chance you are going to get a phone call. You're going to say, "Hey, we need you out here with our, violence prevention coordinator from Kankakee United." I'm so sorry. Her name's
Johnny Wiggs.
Thank you,
Johnny Wiggs.
I would imagine you or someone from Kankakee Forgives is going to be called out onto the scene with Johnny, right? Mm-hmm. So how does that side of things work?
Yeah, it's just like that. If something happens, Johnny and I are in close communication with the situation where it happened, and we immediately get on a game plan, deploy people out to the situation, and come around that family to discover the needs and meet them. It's really just that simple. So whether that's children who need to be displaced, or a home that needs to be a window boarded up, or going to the hospital, or making sure the children are fed, are they in school? So becoming advocates on every level of what has affected this person that's been a victim of gun violence. So it's a very intense work.
I can't even imagine what that is like, walking into those situations. I mean, obviously, is there an example that you can give? I mean, obviously you're not naming names or anything like that, but I'm sure there's an example you can give of how that work is actually paid off, and why it's so important for you to show up right then and there, and not end up talking to this kid months or years from now in some type of other situation at school.
Yeah. I'll tell you, one way it's paid off is when I can walk into a school and see a child who has lost a dear loved one smiling. That says it all. And when you know that their child was at risk even before the loss of, and this could have been an event that just sent them off the edge, but because of a team that quickly responded and got the services they needed, and the continued support, the communication with the school, and just make sure that they're okay. And then to walk in and say, hey, Miss Clark, that's how it pays off. Yeah. That's when you see people well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because a lot of the violence is coming from untreated trauma from previous violence, and they're not well. And so the cycle of violence just continues.
And how often, are kids affected by the shootings that have happened in the city? Are most times, is there a child that's being affected? Have you found so far?
Yeah. So as a matter of fact, we just did presentations at a school. We surveyed over 400 students, and that was just slips of paper. Gave everybody one, just circle the answers. And I actually Aubrey put these statistics together for me. 70% of those students reported having a family member affected by gun violence. And that was 400 in one school.
Yeah, because there's how many kids in the district?
Over 5,000.
Yeah.
So when in the early stages of this, I was doing a summer program at the high school, and we come to school. So it was 40 high school students working with 40 middle school students, learning how to be mentors. And we had been talking about who's on your team. Well, who's on your pit crew? It's an RC program, another program.
Okay.
I wrote
the man of many programs.
Yeah. So
Clark.
in it, it's like who's on your pit crew. So it's a remote control car program. And so you're looking at,
cool.
Do you trust the guy putting the bolts on your tires, right? That kind of thing.
Okay.
And it's like relatable because they're racing the cars and then dealing with it in real time. But anyway, this one particular day, and this is a summer school program, we drilled down, and I don't know why. I would say it was divine, but I was just like, man, y'all need to watch where y'all going, man. Y'all need to watch where y'all. And they were like, why is he so intense? That night, most of the mentors, the high school students, went to a little outdoor gathering, and somebody rolled up shooting. And one of our girls got shot. She lived, thank God. But so the next day, if you can only imagine, it was just so heavy. And I'm trying to figure out, man, what's going on? Because at that time, we weren't in the same relationship with community response to violence. So it was just like, what happened? And they told me what happened. And it's like, wow. So that was, it affects everyone. So the mistake, and I heard Dr. Walters actually say that today, the mistake that people make in this community is that either that was a long time ago, or they don't realize that when one person gets affected, how far reaching the effect is on the community.
It's a ripple effect.
It's a ripple effect.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people that are affected by it, sometimes severely, go unnoticed because you're not in the family. And so, but sometimes people are really hurting and they never, I think one of the first experiences I had with that was when we were doing it at the center. This very early. This is pre-COVID. And we drilling down on it. And so a mom steps in. And this was one of the results. His parents were coming in like, what is happening in here? Like, my kid is doing good.
Yeah, like my kid really loves coming here.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Right. Mike is not the chicken. So
he's doing his homework now.
Right. All of that happened.
Yeah.
So a mom steps in and she starts to tell me about the loss of a loved one for her. And as she's telling me, she starts bawling. And I'm thinking this was like in the last week or 2 weeks. It was years ago. I said, have you ever talked to him? And she's like, I pray with him, and I got that kind of thing going on, but like actually intensive focus on how do we get from where you are right now to being whole again. A lot of it just goes untreated. Yeah. So I'm happy that Kankakee Forgives has this opportunity though, and working closely with all the way up to the state's attorney's office, who has a lot of great programs. The city of Kankakee is very proactive in getting out there. A lot of the service providers are just arms open all over the city. And we are making some moves that are like, and when I say we, I'm not saying just Kankakee Forgives. I'm saying this network is coming together and we're able to move a lot more swiftly and a lot more deeply to penetrate that pain that could just cause more pain and help people. So it's an exciting time.
It is. And it's so great to see so many organizations involved with this because it takes so many people to curb these, the gun violence and just violence in general. And it's because of what we just said, the ripple effect of how many people it affects. Mm-hmm. It takes a lot of people to figure out all those people that are affected.
Yes.
So it can't just, the burden can't be shouldered on Kankakee Forgives or Kankakee United or the state's attorney's office or the city police, whoever it is. It can't be just a burden on them. Yeah. It's going to take all of us. Yeah. What are some things you want? I mean, Kankakee Forgives does so many other things. What are some other things you want to touch on about Kankakee Forgives that you want people to know?
Well, I do want people to know that Kankakee Forgives also, because a lot of times we're thinking about the victims.
Yes.
And even when I've talked with the chief of police and the mayor, it's like most times, like this is very unique because most times people are just dealing with the victims. But we actually know that if one person dies, two families lose someone. You got the victim and you got the perpetrator. They're gone. But typically, the perpetrator does not get any service. So if they catch that perpetrator, they don't talk to the grieving mom or the grieving younger brother. We're taking you to jail. And if there's a household that just lost someone. So we also approach that. And so we have a very strong working relationship with probation. Sheriff Mike Downey has been a friend to help us identify, okay, who's getting ready to come out of Department of Corrections back into Kankakee, and how do we get them and get them on a plan so when they come back, they don't go back into the same system.
Yes.
How do we help this mom? How do we help this family that's dealing with the shame?
There's a lot of shame.
There's a lot of shame.
That. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one thing people need to know. We're not a victim-focused organization. We want to help the whole community. And that's no matter what side of the line you're on of violence.
Yeah.
To receive or Yep. So, and there's no age limit on who we deal with. There's no fee to any services that we provide. Even when services start to run out, especially when it relates to therapy and counseling, it's like, oh, we got how many sessions left? And we've had people, it's like, sessions up. We make sure that we connect them to another provider that'll carry them from there. So yeah, but if someone needed services, the easiest way to find us is on our website, kankakeeforgives.org, and just click on the services tab, and our team responds almost immediately, unless it's 2:00 in the morning. Yeah, we get right back to them. If case management is needed, that's exactly what you need, you could contact Mackenzie, MAKENZIE-Flores, FLORES, at kankakeeforgives.org. Yep, those would be the things. But yeah, I would say if I wanted to address, I would say my biggest thing, Jake, is I was going through a leadership boot camp. And the leader, he was amazing, just an amazing guy. And I was talking to him about vision and just all of these things that are actually happening now, but I just never knew how. It takes a long time sometimes, right?
It takes a long time. It does.
Yep. So, and I'm talking to him, and he was like, you know what? I'm going to do you a favor to help you decide what you're going to focus on. So he sent me a link to a marketing firm. And pretty serious marketing firm out in California, but they actually help corporations identify where to set up their businesses. He said, but the information that's in here is how they determine where the community is going. And so one of the markers is in the mosaic is what they call it. One of the markers in there was what is the thing that the community is struggling with the most? Number one was hope for the future. For Kankakee.
Ooh, you hit the nail right on the head. I feel that.
Yeah. So the thing that we, a lot of us do, like even this podcast, just has identified that we need to produce positive things so people can have hope. All is not lost. We are going somewhere, and you may not feel it right now, but think about your children and your grandchildren. And if we're going to do anything to build hope, these are the types of things that we need to do. And we need to report those things to our community. So I'm a stories guy, and sometimes it's like, well, what about? I was like, I know that. We're working on that. But right now we just need to.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, they're right. Exactly. And I would love to know from your perspective, since you're right in the thick of violence prevention, what is the one thing that each one of us can do to help, even if we don't have the time to donate to Kankakee Forgives or whatever, just something that's very simple that we can all just do to move forward and prevent violence?
Yeah, this is going to sound so corny, but I'm telling you, wave and smile at people in your community. That, I think about the young man, you probably know this story. He just did one thing. He held, every day at school, he held the door. They laughed at him. They persecuted him. They called him names. I think even a couple of times somebody might have pushed him or something, but he didn't stop doing this one simple thing. This young man is a public speaker now. So he ends up leading assemblies in his school, and the way they saw him it's just shifted. And so I think that just smiling at people, saying, "Hi, hey, how you doing?"
Just saying hello.
Yep, just saying hello to everybody, not just certain people. But I would say second to that would be, as much as humanly possible, be present. Every event doesn't need to be of high interest to you. But if you can be present, it just says we're together. And it says we matter. But I think that what our community struggles with is, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go there. I'm not interested. I don't need that. But as a community, if we started looking at, it's not that I need that, it's that we need each other, and let's be present with each other to support each other in our events and activities. And it says something to our children, who eventually are going to be the ones
doing what we're doing. Yeah.
Or taking care of us.
Right. That too. Yeah.
So, yeah, I know when children see the adults united, they feel safer. And when you have children that feel safe, they're less likely to feel anxious and do things that could hurt our community. So those would be my two simple things.
I love that.
Yeah.
Speaking of events, there are some events coming up that Kankakee Forgives is doing. I don't know if you want to mention those.
Yeah. So April 22nd, we're doing our walk against gun violence. I encourage everyone to find that on our Facebook page. It might be on the webpage, but I don't want to overspeak. But it is a day that we're going to, it's not going to be a negative day. It's going to be a day that we remember. We do want to remember, but we also want to celebrate that we are moving forward, that we are a community that will take action against gun violence. We'll support families. So that's on the 22nd. It'll be right here downtown. Then there is thank you, Aubrey.
Yes, thank you,
The walk
Aubrey.
starts at 9 a.m. We suggest that you come at 8:45, and we'll finish right here at our office on the Old Love's Christian Bookstore, located at 249 South Schuyler Avenue.
Fun fact, the Kankakee Podcast Studios, Pathfinder, and Kankakee Forgives were all in the same building. So.
Yes. Yeah. Working together.
Yes, that's right, man.
Yeah. And then there's another event. This is actually not an event that we're hosting, but I love it, and we're going to be a part of it. But that's the Families and Faces Behind Violence that Kankakee School District is actually hosting. And they have youth that are going to be telling the story from their perspective. And it's going to be a great event. That's on April the 27th. And it's going to be at Kankakee High School. I do not have a time on that yet.
Okay, sure. Yeah. But people at this point, they can still get more information on your website or social media as well.
Yeah.
So, and then something that's ongoing is the Midnight Hoops, right?
Midnight basketball.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That goes on once a week, twice a week?
Every Saturday night.
Okay.
And when we start our Safe Summer Initiative, May the 1st, that'll be along with an array of a lot of other activities that will include arts and crafts. And it's just, I'm like, y'all are doing so good with this. But May the 1st, that'll be 2 nights a week.
Okay. So, summertime, got more time on their hands. So,
that'll include dinner and basketball and other activities, but we're going to broaden it to include some of our educational pieces to empower our community. So, like police stops. Yeah.
Those are important.
Yep.
Yeah.
Those are very important.
Yeah. So many of us don't know what to do at a police stop or all those things.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay. Anything else, Aaron? I know we could go on forever.
I know.
There's so many things. I've always.
Look, I confess that I like to talk.
Well, but you don't just talk to talk. You talk with purpose, and I feel like you have a lot of wisdom, and you have a lot of insights to the community that I don't, that our listeners don't per se sometimes. So it's just good to actually get like a report, of what's happening, what is being done to prevent violence in our community. So
thank you, Jay.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate the opportunity.
You're very welcome. That concludes this episode of Kankakee Podcast. I'm Jake Lamore. Thank you so much for listening. Please hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Kankakee Podcast. Shout out to Carrie O'Connell for supporting the show each month through Patreon. If you want your name announced on a future episode, sign up at patreon.com/Kankakee Podcast. Special thanks to our sponsors, Chicago Dough Company, Noble Dairy Queen Stores, Frank's Appliance Center and Sleep Source, Pigosh Engineering, King Music, Little Me's Studio, Taco John's, D. Westfall Jewelers, and Edward Jones Financial Advisor, Adam Elroy. Kankakee Podcast is produced by the fine team at Pathfinder, a full-service marketing agency in downtown Kankakee. Learn more at yourpathfinder.io. Our theme song is by Lupe Carroll.
This river carries